You guys in the comments have been absolutely killing it in terms of asking some great questions, and today is another one that I'm going to be talking through about internal versus external measures of training intensity. So basically I'm talking about heart rate versus power or pace, but then also things like subjective measures in terms of RPE, rating perceived exertion, or just feel in general, and how they all mix into performance. So let's get stuck into it. What is the best way to go? Should it be on feel, or should we be using some of the numbers to track our training? Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome back to the channel, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Welcome to the channel. If you're brand new, please consider subscribing down below. I know large people who watch these videos, large percentage, don't actually subscribe anyway, so I'd really love you to hit that big red button down below. Definitely helps the channel to grow, and if you could, turn the bell notification on and click that one as well. Get notified as soon as a video drops throughout the week. You'll know straight away, be able to watch it, get the comments in, and typically I'm responding to every comment at the moment, and I'm loving the questions that are coming through. So this one, again, as I said in the intro, is leveraging off a question that we had from earlier in the week or last week, talking about what is the best measure to use? Should I be training and racing off feel? Does it differ for long versus short distance? Should I be using more data? Should I use internal or external measures? So I'm going to break it down quite simple. Basically, we've got three ways of monitoring our training intensity. We have the obvious one, which is no data at all, and it's just all on feel. And that's typically measured by what we call rating of perceived exertion. So you might have seen these scales before, or RPE. It's basically a 0 to 10 scale, or there's even up to a 20 scale. You could have it on whatever you like, really. It's just a measure of intensity on a continuum. So 0 to 10 is the typical one, but you could use the up to 20. But essentially what it does is that something like 0 is basically not doing anything at all. 10 out of 10 is going as hard as maximal as you can. 5 is sort of moderate, starting to work a little bit, and then as we get to 7s and 8s, that's starting to get quite high intensity. 9 is obviously quite difficult, etc. So there's this continuum of intensity, and we can kind of, I guess, subjectively understand what is it at, and then we self-rate. So this is a really good method for, one, if you're just getting into endurance sport, you're just getting into training in general, and you're wanting to just get a feel for, do I actually like doing this sport? Do I actually like doing this training in the first place? Because that's a big part of being motivated to then continue it. But you can get a bit of an understanding of, well, I'm trying to go out and do something easy, so I'm going to work off how hard is this out of 10. Okay, it's a 3 to 4 out of 10. That's pretty easy to understand, particularly when you're brand new. So I use this quite a bit when I've got athletes who maybe don't use data, or like I said, brand new. They don't have access to a watch yet. They don't have heart rate. They may not have a power meter on the bike. So we can use RPE. Particularly swimming is a good one. You can't look at your watch while you're in the pool doing laps. You can stop it at the end of the lap and have a look, but that's kind of breaking up a set if you're trying to do a long set. So using RPE can be just a good one to work off. All right, how hard do I feel like I'm exerting? And their correlation to what we see in terms of lab testing and specific data and training zones is actually pretty good if we get the RPE prescription right. The other thing we have to consider, though, from my end, is if I prescribe a 3 to 4 out of 10, what I perceive as a 3 out of 4 or 3 to 4 out of 10 could be something very different to what the athlete perceives as a 3 or 4 out of 10. So we have to be on the same page in terms of understanding expectations of that scale and what it actually means for you. But like I said, can be quite useful. In terms of then starting to use some data, we've then got two ways we can look at intensity. We can look at the internal, which is something like heart rate. It's happening within ourselves. That is what we can, I guess, we are responding to, or the internal response to the output. And heart rate is going to vary based on what the intensity is. So the intensity goes up, our heart rate's going to go up with it. Intensity goes down, so does our heart rate. If we maintain intensity, we start to steady state and it plateaus. So we've got a broad range of, I guess, ideas around where our heart rate should be. But then again, like the RPE, you need to be on the same page with your coach, or understanding from a testing perspective, go into a little bit more detail on what are those heart rates mean for you, and what is an easy heart rate versus a moderate versus a hard, and how do they all fit in terms of different types of sessions of the adaptation. So the prescription of those sessions is quite critical. But once you've got that mapped out in terms of training zones, and I've done a training zones video before breaking down the 5-zone system and breaking down the complexity behind 220 minus your age and how inaccurate that can be for a lot of people. You can check those out on my channel. Go check out those videos. I might link one above and in the description down below. But in terms of using heart rate, again, it's internal. It's something within the body that is being monitored and measured. You might have seen athletes with the masks on and they might be having a phone strapped to it. It's called a VO2 Master. I've used one at the lab before. Like someone like Lionel Sanders, for example, the pro triathlete, was using it over in Kona as some preparation for world championships. He'd go out running or riding with this thing on his face, measuring his oxygen consumption. That's another internal measure of what's going on because it's physiology within us. The external part of it is something like pace or power, where we're monitoring intensity output as a result of those internal measures. So this one's a little bit more, I guess, independent, and it's the type of thing that we can get very specific on a training intensity and a stimulus because we're looking at something that isn't going to vary based on our adaptation. If we need to hit, if we know during the race we need to hit 300 watts on the bike for a 20-minute period, I'm just pulling these numbers out. If we need to hit 300 watts on the bike, we need to hit 410 pace. That's an external number. We know the output we need to hit. So as we get fitter and faster, you would expect things like heart rate to come down, our VO2 to come down because we're more economical. These types of things might change throughout the internal, but the external output is still the same. So we can get that very specific race tune result, if you like. But also we're manipulating some other factors that take out of the equation in terms of if you start riding or running up and down through hills, if it's a hot day versus a cold day, that might also influence what your heart rate does. It's also going to keep the stimulus quite consistent. We have a bit more, I guess, scope to work off an external variable. Where does this all sort of fit in terms of training and racing? You can use basically whatever you like. There's no right or wrong. Some people are going to have different methods. I like using heart rate and pace and power depending on different sessions. Long, slow sessions, I like heart rate a little bit better. Higher intensity sessions where we've got shorter time. We've got oxygen demands to work through, things like that. Power is a little bit better or pace is a little bit better if you're running. It doesn't matter though. You could use heart rate at the high intensity. I've talked through the pros and cons before in a previous video. I'll link that above and in the description. But it's the type of thing that you could use heart rate for the high intensity. You could use power for the low intensity. But you need to understand how does that work and fit in for that particular session, and are you actually targeting the right area? This is where RPE can be quite simple and useful for the athletes who go, I'm a bit overwhelmed by all this data and different pieces of technology, or I don't have access to it. I can just keep a simple system if I need to go easy, moderate, or hard, but I'm fine-tuning it by saying it's a 3 out of 10 today rather than a 5 out of 10. Because a 5 out of 10 could still feel quite comfortable, but it's not quite as easy as what a 3 out of 4 is. The trap that a lot of athletes fall into and a lot of coaches fall into is they prescribe things like half marathon pace, or we're doing Ironman pace in our training session, which I'm going to put out there and say is complete rubbish, because what does that mean? What does that mean for you? Yeah, half Ironman pace. The worst thing I see all the time is athletes who've never done a half Ironman before and then get told to do half Ironman pace. What is that? Well, there's no prescription. So we use these. We can use RPE. We can use internal training monitoring tools in terms of heart rate, understanding what is heart rate doing, or oxygen consumption, something like that. And then we can also look at the external in terms of pace and power to give us accurate prescription of what training we need to do for a specific physiological effect. Now, in terms of racing, probably the last thing I'll touch on here is you can monitor. A lot of guys like to just race on feel and go, I've done the preparation, I've done the work, I know my body's going to be able to handle it, and just race how I feel. That can be a good way to do it, particularly long course when you don't have to be so attached to the data. I think it's probably more relevant in the short course that you look at some of the numbers a bit more accurately, purely from the fact that you're going to be fine-tuning what maximal intensities or high intensities you can work at for those periods. It's going to be ideal. If you go too short though, something like an 800 or 1500 meter, it's more tactical at that point when you're working with other people around you. So you best to work off, all right, I'm feeling okay, but I need to stick on the wheel of the person in front or behind the person in front to keep up and keep myself in the race. So your pace almost doesn't matter at that point. It's just a case of can you work in with the current race situation and what is going on around you. Long course though, I guess a mix of both power to not overexert or heart rate to not overexert yourself too early in the race is critical, but then understanding that your body might be experiencing different things based on the conditions. A lot of athletes who train in Melbourne cool through winter, then go and race in WA in Perth and it's quite hot, or go race Kona at the end of the year. All of your responses, if you haven't been able to go over and do a complete acclimatization period, all of your responses are going to be different on race day. And so being aware of that and going, well, okay, I know that my heart rate might be looking okay, or my power's looking good. My heart rate's through the roof though. Maybe I should just back it off a bit and just be more mindful. The course might be a bit more hilly than you thought, so let's work off a bit of feel. Don't necessarily have to go down one or the other. A lot of people sort of go, oh, you're a sports scientist, all you talk about is data, blah, blah, blah. Not really. You work in what's best for you, because that's going to make the most sense to you, and it's also going to motivate you then. If it's clear and consistent, it's going to be the best way to keep your training on track. So just finding a system that works. I guess there's a quick comparison between a couple that you can use. They all have their pros and cons, so be aware of that. Talk through that with your coach. If you want any further advice, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help in terms of building and working around a system that's going to work for you, for your goals, what access to technology and data you've got, how much data analysis you want to do. So I guess the overall point is you're not overwhelmed by the data, but you can make it useful, and based on whichever type of training intensity monitoring tools or I guess intensity scales you want to use, it's going to be meaningful and useful to you, and you're going to get the most result or the best results out of it. So that's a quick summary of the question I had. Great question, and keep the questions coming in. Make sure if you haven't, please subscribe down below, and go check out my Instagram page as well. I'm going to be posting a lot more on Instagram, just some short, sharp little pieces of content, some quotes, things like that, just to keep things ticking over day to day in between when these videos go up. But again, going to try and get more of these videos up, so please hit the subscribe button to keep supporting the channel. Questions in the comment section down below. That is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.